All right. So you should see my slides now. Hello, everyone. Good to see you all. Can you hear me well? Yeah, cool. So I'm so sorry I can't be there on site. I was looking forward to join your wonderful venue and be in Japan. I've been once in Japan before, and it was one of our favorite vacations. So we were looking forward to go again. I would like to thank the organizers for just putting this whole event together. It's super difficult to do it in a hybrid mode where you have half of your participants face to face and half of them virtually, but you're doing awesome job here. And I would also like to thank all the people who translated my content in the past and did this wonderful book. I received it together with this t-shirt about a week ago. So thank you for that. And it's awesome. That's one of those few things which I wrote, but I can't read, right? Because those letters are like super difficult for me. So I have no clue what is there, but I hope it's the same content. So I have a habit of starting with a video. So you wake up and remember a little bit, right? So let me start the video here. So it was a short video, not that long, really. And as you might see, Papua is a very different place from where we live, closer to you than from me. And it's extremely interesting. Languages of Papua New Guinea today count over 850. To give you an example, people who speak the same language often count less than 1,000. Though there are similarities, they often have their own rules, rituals, and cultures. Now, Margaret Mead was an American culture anthropologist, and she did a research at Papua New Guinea. And during her research, she focused on cooperation, competition, and individualism. She even said the individualism is a culture suicide. She's been going through hundreds of tribes, comparing their cultures, behavior, social systems. But she didn't go to Papua to tell them how they should live their lives, what practices and tools they should use. She's been curious, trying to understand them. Now, in one organization, there are several different teams, tribes, and cultures. They have sometimes even their own language. Like imagine the finance department, marketing, sales, or software developers. And they often don't even understand each other. You see the connection? Now let's imagine that as a Scrum Master, you are a culture anthropologist, and all you have to bring along is curiosity and playfulness. You strive for understanding. So what would happen if we Agile coaches, Scrum Masters, start from culture anthropologist mindset, observing, listening first, search for understanding? But how many times we just push our values without listening first? You know, Scrum is about this, you have to do it this way. There is a retrospective every sprint, and you must do daily Scrum daily, no longer than 15 minutes. Now, will it make a difference? Just being a culture anthropologist, right? So I want to show you how I started, so you know where I'm coming from. So in 2005, I've been in the US, and that was my first exposure to Scrum. And when I came back, I was happy to be back at a normal way of working. And at the time, my manager said, and now you have to be a Scrum Master. And I was like, I don't want to be a Scrum Master. They said, yeah, but you have to, you're the only one who ever experienced Scrum from our company. It's like, yeah, no, but I don't like Scrum. It's like, I don't like it either. But you just started because those customers, they requested it. So I said, okay, I'm starting it, but you have 3 months and then I'm returning back to my original job. And he said yes. So that was a deal. So I came next day to those 2 teams, my colleagues. I knew them for a long time, so no strangers. And my first sentence was something about, so we are starting this new customer, as you all know, and we're going to be doing Scrum. Isn't that great? Spending 7 months in the US will make you more enthusiastic about things, right? Everything is awesome. So, and I look at them and they look back at me and saying like, you forget it. We are not doing that bullshit. I was like, what should I do, right? I don't know what to do. So I was like, yeah, but we have to. My only argument at the time was we have to. Because the customers ask us, I would never choose it myself. I didn't even like Scrum. They look at me and they like me, as I told you, friends, colleagues for years. So they say, okay, that's fine. We'll try. I know. They force you into this. And then one of my the person I've been working with for a long time, he said, can we fake it? I look at him, so like, sure, I can't care less, right? Of course we can fake it. Just make sure the customers don't realize. And that's how I started. I just tried to make sure they don't realize. As we started, we realized it's more difficult to fake it than do it. So we actually start doing Scrum. And I'm intentionally choosing the word doing because that's what we thought. It's about process. We must have those meetings and practices. We have to do this and that. We didn't like it much, but we took it as something we must do. Try to follow as much so the customers feel we are doing a good job. We have a feeling that we are the best team ever, right? We didn't feel like we need an improvement. We didn't feel a need for a change. We've been pushed into it. So not a best start, I would say. So sometimes 12, 18 months after, we start realizing that this silly process we didn't like and we didn't want is actually helping us. So that was interesting. Interesting observation. How come that we, the best team ever, which was the mindset, right? The best team ever. How come that this best team ever can be even better with this silly, stupid process? There must be something on it. So that was my learning many years back. So I started coming to conferences. I've been actually used to be speaking at 12 conferences per year, once per month, pretty much, traveling a lot, joining the local communities, reading blogs, books, etc. And becoming eventually the most enthusiastic person about Agile and Scrum all around. At least that was the image I tried to do. We started a local community. We were running a conference. Last year was supposed to be the 10-year anniversary of Agile Prague, which we eventually need to cancel because that doesn't make sense. But I'm still running a virtual conferences now every month, Agile 100. And I wrote a couple books. The first one, Czech language book. The other one, The Great ScrumMaster. It just got translated. Thank you guys very much. And the last one is called Agile Leader and it's been published in this last December for Edison Wesley again. So if you like The Great ScrumMaster, call out to the translators and publishers, and ask them to translate it as well. So I start to really live Agile. I realized that there is a difference between doing it and being it. And that's quite significant, but it was a journey for a couple of years. And I'm still on it. I'm teaching classes now, doing some coaching, mostly at the executive level, helping organizations to shift their cultures. And what I learned the most is that I'm still not agile enough. There is always a better way of working. There is always something which I didn't understand yet, and now I do. And then another, and another, and another. So it's a journey, which will never stop. But for a Scrum Master, the journey starts with this: we are good enough. We don't need a change. You have to be agile. You have to use Scrum. Very often, unfortunately. So what do you think is a goal of a Scrum Master, right? So I have this one slide here that Scrum Master is more than just a team assistant, but I was thinking that maybe you can use a chat and write down a few, and I need to find it now, I found it. Write down a few things. You can write in Japanese, that's fine. I will just not read it, but the others can. So what do you think is a goal of Scrum Master? It's more than just a team assistant, but what do you think is a goal? And use your chat to write some ideas so others can read it. And sorry for those who are in face-to-face, but you might have your smartphones as well. You might not be connected. No one? Make teams self-organized. Yeah, somebody was reading my book, I guess. I should not ask that question when I learned that 55 people already got the book. Yeah, so that's the correct answer. The first person who was there, can't read his name or her name. So it's more than just a team assistant. Your goal is actually do nothing. And that was actually a game changer when I realized that the goal is to do nothing. That changed a lot because that's what I love. You know, imagine that, doing nothing and everything is working by itself because it's self-organizing. Isn't that great? But that takes time. It's actually much more difficult to make it happen than to do it yourself or tell people what to do. So during my journey, I came up with this model of I create high-performing teams, right? I came up with this model of Scrum Master state of mind, which helps you to what are the Scrum Master's approaches. And the first one, very important at the beginning, is about teaching, mentoring, sharing experiences. At the beginning of your journey, they don't know, right? Your teams don't know. They don't do it wrong because they want to do something to you or break whatever you're trying to build. They just don't understand. The Agile Scrum way of working is so different, like in a different dimension, right? It's a shift. And it's so difficult to digest. I mean, you read Scrum Guide, but you still don't understand it. So you might need to come back and teach them and tell them and explain for like 100 times. You need to tell them examples. Share experiences from your previous job. Hey, in this team, we've been doing this, and I was reading this article, and they were suggesting to do this practice. And by the way, if you do that well enough and long enough, they eventually hear all of your stories and know all the practices. And they've been trying them out and shifting them and practicing, experimenting. So you end up saying, like, what shall I do? I told them everything I know. Panic. What shall I do, right? So the good news is that there is another approach, helping removing impediments. And impediments are always there, specifically at the beginning of a journey. But that one is a trap. Trap for teams and Scrum Masters. Because Scrum Masters, that's where it's coming from. They try to help, try to be useful. They are happy because finally there is something which is important, something which is useful, something tangible. And at the beginning, the teams are happy. They're saying, oh, thank you. Thank you for that password you brought me. You know, I was waiting for it already for a couple of days and can't really work. And now can you save me at least a couple hours? Thank you very much. And thank you for that coffee. I needed it. But then sooner or later, it will change like this without a prior notice. And that's tough because the feedback you start getting is actually very different. They're saying, hey, what takes you so long? I'm waiting here for your password or for this or for that for a long time. So we don't think you're working. We actually are afraid. Can you tell us what you've been doing most of your day? Because we don't really trust you. And that's a difficult, tough space to be at. Because you were just trying to be helpful. They used to appreciate it, and now they don't anymore. So you're sitting there, like I was just trying to help, right? Like this. And here's the thing, it should have never said remove impediments. We just make it shorter. What it should say in reality is help teams so they can remove their impediments themselves. And what it really should say is be a servant leader. Help them to grow. Help them to take over the responsibility and ownership because you are not their assistant. You're not their mother either. You're a leader. You need to help them to grow up. And if you start doing that, very soon after, actually, they made it. They take over the responsibility and they start changing. And you end up the same way, you know, observing, saying like, what shall I do? They don't need me anymore. You look around and you see facilitation. That's a good start. Facilitation is a soft skill. You say, I can become a professional facilitator. That's good. So maybe I go for a training, maybe a practice. But eventually, at the end of the day, you know, they learn all those facilitation techniques. They know when to do brainstorming, when to discuss advantages, disadvantages first, when to vote. And you end up facilitating less and less and less because they just take it over, right? Those meetings we have in Scrum, like for example, daily Scrum, they can self-facilitate it after one sprint. Not a big deal, right? They can do it. It's a simple meeting. So at the end of the time, all what there remains is from the meetings is actually retrospective. And even at the beginning, we only have 4 meetings. It didn't take that long. So the Scrum Masters sort of back with the question saying like, what should I do most of my time? Panic. So here is another misunderstanding. It should never said facilitate meetings. It actually says facilitate. And the facilitation is also applicable to any conversation which is happening internally within a team, but also with a team and somebody else, like customers, stakeholders, managers, other teams in the organizations, right? And that's sometimes tough because there are conflicts. They don't know how to collaborate. They didn't learn it yet. So that's a lot of work at first. But again, sooner or later, you made it and that whole thing became a self-organizing. And then you feel like, what should I do, right? What's next? And the next one is coaching. So people often ask me, like, what's the difference between coaching and mentoring? So I would say coaching is not about you. It's actually the metaphor for coaching, and that's where the picture is coming from. It's like you walk with a virtual mirror, right? You're having this mirror and you're showing the other people, the teams, etc., themselves from different angles. Like, do you see that? And what do you think about this? You're asking questions. not walking with the mirror, just a metaphor, but asking questions. And coaching goal is about raising people awareness. So there is a big difference between teaching from first quadrant and coaching. Because in teaching, you must be an expert. You must know the best. Because you're telling people how it should be. You're explaining, you're sharing stories. In coaching, you don't have to know anything. So I can actually coach you on how to learn, I don't know, German, for example, to choose some very different language from what you most likely speak. I don't know German at all. The only two languages I know is my mother tongue, Czech, and English, right? But I can still coach you on how to learn German. But I can't, no matter what I do, teach you German language because I don't know anything except like 2-3 words, right? So that's very interesting, coaching, how that possibly can work. And I didn't know. At the beginning of my journey, I didn't even know it exists. I thought it's all about practices. We need to follow them. Then I thought, oh, it's a little bit more, maybe some team organization. I start liking it. Oh, there's this coaching and facilitation, but I don't really believe in it yet. And it was coming back. With every conference, somebody speaking about it, with every blog post, there was this and this and that. And I was like, this coaching, that's weird. Then I actually start talking about it. But until I got my first experience with coaching, first exposure by a coach, I actually didn't get it. It's so different from what we are usually learning at schools. Because I can't really digest it myself. It was so hard. It's not that predictable. Like, how can I help people if I don't tell them what to do? Help them figure it out themselves? Like, what do you mean? Right? So the first exposure to coaching I got when we went snowboarding in the wintertime to the Alps. And, you know, those big slopes. You go on the left uphill and you're watching those first snowboarders going downhill, right? The first people with a completely empty slope still because you're one of the first people going up. And those two guys been going like this down with no energy in it, like really seamlessly flipping and snowboarding downhill. And that was like so nice. I was looking at them and start complaining to my friend there, saying like, you know, I will never learn this. I even last year, I, applied for a private lesson with instructor. It didn't help me at all because my snowboarding was always like, oh, and oh, with all the body and all the energy. And it was not like this at all. And I wanted to learn this, but it just didn't help. So he looked at me and he said like, hey, do you want to try some coaching? We've been talking about coaching for a long time now. I look at him as like, coaching? Like really? Why not, right? We have a whole weekend, right? So we actually started. He only asked me questions like, what do you feel? Where is your strength? You're more on the front or back leg and right or left, or what was your feeling, etc. In the middle of a day, I was able to go downhill like this, not on a steep slope, but reasonable one, without energy, flipping. Something which I was unable to do myself for years, something which I was unable to get by traditional teachers and instructors. That was like a magic. So I went home back from that skiing trip, go to the bookstore. The first one I met, took the first book from the shelf. One was about agile, one was about coaching, the other one was about facilitation. I bought the two books, I read them and started trying. I was a lousy coach, I'm quite sure, but I at least started. And then, of course, as I was open about it, I asked for permission. My team said, "Oh, yeah, sure, you can do that. But can we read those books as well? Because if you find them so interesting, we want to read it and try it as well. So can we do that?" Sure, of course, why not, right? So that's how we all started. And it was fuzzy, but it was working. I realized I can help our employees much better than before. And that was so surprising. And I actually never forgot how to snowboard from that time. And I actually never forgot how eye-opening coaching is and how useful facilitation is. And of course, as the year went, I went to different classes, agile coaching, agile facilitation, organizational system relationship coaching, one of my favorite classes because they focus on coaching teams and systems, etc., etc. So that's never-ending journey. I never became as great as those professional coaches who only coach. And you might not either, but it's okay. All you need is a little bit of coaching, a little bit of facilitation, those two soft skills. Finally, to finish this whole picture, right? We have those 4 quadrants: teaching, removing impediments, facilitation, coaching. But in the middle, there is one missing piece, and that's observing. And it's a skill by itself. So I tell you one story about a director in Toyota who, story says, right? One day he called all of his managers and asked them, well, you're going to stand here. I created those 2 yellow footprints. You're going to stand exactly that space and observe your team working. And after 2 hours, you come back to me, he said, and tell me what you've seen. So they start coming, right? With the same story, every one of those. Saying, that's such a great, team. No issues, no problems. Everything is perfect. He said, okay, go back for additional 2 hours. And he said that after 5 times standing there for 2 hours, they finally start coming with improvements. So there is a reason why ScrumMaster in Scrum is a full-time position. You need to be a ScrumMaster because you need to have a time and focus to observe. Now, how likely you're going to observe if you're a team member at the same time? You don't, right? Because there is more tangible work to be done. So if you want to be a Scrum Master, one of those things is it's a full-time job. You may have more teams, but being a Scrum Master is a full-time job. Don't combine it with something else. It just doesn't work. Now, another segment I want to focus are the meta skills. Those are those higher cognitive skills. They are more abstract than the 5 approaches I've been just discussing here. And the first of those is curiosity. That's a culture anthropologist mind, right? Be curious. Why is it happening this way? Okay, they don't want to do a retrospective every sprint. Why is that? And they feel they are the best team ever. Interesting. How come? I want to know more, right? Like this. Then second one, respect. So for Scrum Master, that's a critical one because there is no right, no wrong. They're just different angles on a complex system, different perspectives. What seems to be really great from this side might be really bad from that side. For this team, it was great. For that team, it was not. So what shall we do with it, right? Can you respect different opinions, different ideas, different angles? The bigger system you work with, the more complex it is, the more difficult it's going to be. So respect. Patience. That's my favorite. About a year ago, I've got 2 stickers on my laptop saying be patient, be curious. Because I felt that's exactly where I need to improve, right? Every year I do my sort of an internal retrospective, like where do I want to move? What do I need to learn? And for a long time, it was a coaching, facilitation, skills, then product ownership a little bit, then coaching again, facilitation again, etc., storytelling once, right? But then I thought, well, maybe it's about those two things, be patient and be curious. It was so difficult not to speak up, stop telling people, to start asking more, and be patient, don't push. That was the hardest thing. But the most interesting was when I was sharing it with one of my long clients one day, because they've been talking about personal improvements and they say it's tough. And I thought, yeah, I know. I've been having for a year now those two stickers on my laptop and trying to do that. And they look at me. It's like a surprise and say, ah, by the way, we noticed. And I was like, wow, it really works. And they tell me also what impact it created to them, which was really positive. So that was a good feedback I got. But sometimes it takes time. You need to be patient with yourself. You need to be patient with your teams. It takes time. Playfulness, that's my favorite, right? And it's not just playing a games or going for a beer, right? Of course you can do that. That's okay. Gamification is great. But it's more internal mind. Are you enjoying it or are you frustrated? Because at the moment you become frustrated that your team is not moving fast enough, or this organization will never be agile, or things like that, right? I hear all of those at the classes. Then you're done. You're never gonna make it. You need to enjoy that. Being a Scrum Master is like playing this strategic game where you end up in a room, no doors, no windows, and you don't know what to do. Those type of the games. In your pocket, you have, a water, you have a pen, and some other things. Completely useless, so you don't know what to do. So you try jump and you try throw the water in front of something and see what happens. And you try all those crazy different things. And eventually you realize that if you actually jump at the right spot, there is a crack. If you put there the water, it grows, and there is a new way where you can actually continue playing that game, right? So I used to like playing those games when I was at school. And then when I start really realizing what the Scrum Master role is about, I realized that's the same thing. It's like playing those type of games because you have no clue what needs to happen. There is no process which you follow. The best practices doesn't exist in a complex system. I mean, you can get inspired by what the other people do. There is nothing wrong on it. I mean, it's useful. I'm still going for inspirations to the conferences. And I always am able to experiment with it and try it. But still, you need to be playful and figure out your own way and enjoy. Because, for example, my mother, she was always frustrated by those games. She didn't like it. She's like, oh, that's completely not logical. I don't want to do that, right? And I was her. There are people like this. But then maybe you should reconsider. If you can find it playful and fun and enjoy that, oh, it doesn't work. Cool. What else we can try, right? That's the right mindset. So, all four, right? Curiosity, respect, patience, playfulness. So maybe you've been investing a lot into understanding the practices and tools and reading the Scrum process and applying it. So maybe the next step is to focus on one of those meta skills and be more playful, curious, patient, or respectful to different views. Then finally, the other part right here is about learning, right? So what do you really need to learn? So different aspects. It's unlimited learning. I've been talking here about my journey all the time, how I realized that, it's not just about practices, but there are thousands of practices I need to still learn. There is coaching, facilitation, observation. There are those meta skills. Eventually, I realized I need to have this culture anthropologist mind and give them their freedom to experiment and try things. When I started, my weakness was actually this top area master of Agile. I didn't really know enough. I went through 7 months experiment in Scrum. I got some Agile coaches who've been explaining Scrum and Agile to us, but I didn't really know that many practices. I didn't understand it deep. So I actually started doing wrong. And it was a long journey, and it's still a long journey. I'm still understanding Agile differently year by year. I realized something. It's shifting, right? Then on the two sides, right, you have one which says explaining and sharing experiences. So that's a skill by itself. So what I did a training from the back of the room to be better at explaining, but I also did a lot of co-training and feedback from the other people about how can I explain things in a clear way. And currently I'm co-training with many upcoming CST, Certified Scrum Trainer candidates, and they have one thing in common, and I used to have the same. They feel they have to tell you everything. They have to prove they know the most. But that's not always useful. Because then you make all the students confused. You tell them so many things and they don't know what to choose. So what I learned by the years is like clarity is the key and simplicity is the other one. So how can I say the same message in a simple, clear, crisp way? So when I coach the trainers, I always tell them, like, do you have a 1-minute version of that topic? Do you have a 5-minute version? Do you have a 10-minute game or 15-minute game, right? And then do you have an advance? Do you have a story for that? Now, do you always have to do all? No. You already did your 1-minute version. They all seems to be, we are doing it. Then you skip it. It seems to be, how does that look like? It's interesting. Well, then you add a story. And sometimes you want to deeper their experience and play a game, right? I remember there was a person co-training with me, and she was actually having a wonderful game. And then she was having this explanation and 2 stories. And it took about 40 minutes on a topic which I usually do in 10. And then I asked her, like, okay, so why did you share this story? She's like, it's an interesting story. People like it. And why did you play the game? Because people are enjoying it, right? I was like, yeah. Well, what was new, right? What was the message? What's the outcome? What's the value, to use Scrum language, right? What was the value you wanted to create by that backlog item, meaning a topic, right? And did she look at me and say, like, this one? But then it took a bit of a longer conversation, but this one, but I already said it here and here. I was like, yeah, exactly. So you need to choose. You need to prioritize. What is the value and what do you need to say? And sometimes say it in the right order. Because if you start with something and then go to something else, it might be unclear. And it's better to do it vice versa. So teaching and explaining is one skill. I told you before that I did a storytelling class. And I still need to revisit that and do some follow-up on that. It's how to share a story so it's clear. People like to listen. They feel engaged. They feel like the story is about them. Well, there is a skill by itself, right? And you can study that, both of those. On the other hand, we have this facilitation and coaching here, right? And those other 2 segments. 2 soft skills. You can become professional coach, professional facilitator. Now, when I have the full room of people, I usually ask them to raise their hands. So I see some people in the room, so you can raise your hand like this. And the Zoom gives you the option to raise your hand in a Zoom, right? The question is, how many of you went to a formal facilitation class or coaching class? Can you raise your hand? There are a few, because I start seeing notifications. I'm not seeing how many, because maybe I'm not but a lot here. But we have 300 almost participants, right? So my guess is it's like 10% maybe, which is a good ratio. But then when you ask the same question to Scrum Masters, existing Scrum Masters, unfortunately, that's the same thing. 10% of existing Scrum Masters who even feel they are doing it for years. Yes, and did you ever go to a coaching or facilitation class? No. Right? So how likely they're going to be successful? Right? How likely they can do those things? So that's my tip. That's where I started, and I actually find it eye-opening, both of those soft skills. Then finally, at the bottom section, the competencies, right? There are three. There is a business competencies, business practices. So it's not about being a product owner, but it's about your ability to help product owners, how to form a good vision. They always ask this question. How shall we write a vision? How shall we prioritize the backlog? What are the practices, right? Like what else? Like story mapping? Can you explain it to me, right? Or impact mapping? Or what is the method of prioritization? How do we know what is the business value? How do we measure? Things like that, right? It's unlimited space of practices. It's even bigger than the entire Agile, right? You can go to those organizations like Alex Ostenwald, strategizer, right? Who are helping you with discovery process. And you can go to people who are like helping you direct prioritization techniques. All possible. Unlimited space. But at the end of the day, you need to be able to be a service to the product owners. Help them, teach them, coach them, advise them, etc. Then on that side of a spectrum, you have a technical practices. So again, you don't have to be a software developer or anything like that. But you need to understand what are the practices your team needs to do the job. So one of those are the technical practices like continuous integration, right? So I tend to believe that that's kind of normal nowadays. I'm so amazed, like surprised all the time when I go to a company. I say, yeah, I of course have it. They say, no, we don't. I'm like, you don't? So how do you really work? I say, yeah, I know we're struggling and this is not possible. And we still in this time, they still don't know. Automated testing. Oh, no, we do manual testing. But how shall we do it every sprint? It just doesn't work. Yeah, of course it doesn't work. You need to change those, right? So understand those type of things like automation, test automation, continuous integration, continuous delivery, maybe even sometimes. Like what is it about? Pair programming, those type of things. Know them, be able to advise them to the team. And finally, in the middle is something which is often missed. I haven't seen many Agile articles about this, but that's equally important because at the end of the day, Agile is a change. It's a change of your habits. Very tough. Change of how you look at things. Change of approaches. Changing the way you work. And with change management, I really don't have anything like super special new. I'm usually recommending John Kotter. He is the father of all the change management, I would say. Get any of his book and read about 8 steps of successful change. But I'm really using like 3 of those in most of what I do. Eventually, you might need all, but I'm using the first one, create a sense of urgency, because there is no change happening without a need. And so my typical question in organizations is, do you have a need? Do you know why you need to change? And going back to this culture anthropologist mindset, right? Why do they have to change? Be curious. Like, really, what happens if they don't change? That's interesting. Going back to Papua New Guinea. So they're not using money. Do we care? Why would they need it? They don't need a watch. They're actually wearing a watch. It's very interesting to go to those places. They were wearing a watch, but they've been, of course, having no batteries there and swimming in it as well, etc. So they got stuck somewhere at a random hour. They don't need a watch because they go sleep when it's dark. They wake up when it's light. They still live very close to the nature. Do they need money? No. They still exchange, pig for cassava maybe, etc. So now if we go with our practices, we got used to find super cool, like a watch, money, etc. Are we really helping them? Or are they taking them, but then using them in a completely different way without the real understanding? So starting with a culture anthropologist mindset might be useful. And then helping them to realize, like, do we need a change? And if yes, then help them on their journey, explaining, coaching, facilitation, bringing those practices in. But if they don't, maybe not. So sometimes people ask me, like, we need a change. But how shall I start? I'm the only one in this organization. I'm the only one. How can I make the other people to follow me? So here's this one thing which is also in the Master of Agile, and that's your belief. Do you truly believe that Agile is the best way of working? Do you really believe? Are you enthusiastic about it? And I realized sometime early on my journey that that's actually where I need to shift. You can't start fire unless you're firing yourself. So the biggest difference I'm having, comparing some Scrum Masters who are reading a lot, even more than I did, but they are having their doubts. They don't know. They say, hey, I don't know. Maybe, I read somewhere that you should do it this way, but it feels weird to me. How likely do you think they're going to follow? Oh, they don't, right? Because they sense from you this uncertainty. They sense from you there that you're not sure yourself. So when I go there, I tell them, hey, there's this wonderful practice. Do you want to guys try it? I've seen it here, super well working. And I'm not sure if it's going to help you, but I think you should try it. And they say, oh, okay, we'll try it. And then the Scrum Masters are looking at me like, yeah, how did you do it? You've been just telling them the same thing I was telling them for years. I'm saying, well, so good luck. They're now using it, right? Be happy with it. Take it for granted, right? Interesting, right? The only difference was the way how I say it. I felt sure it's going to help. I felt I believe in it. And I was enthusiastic about it. So that will help you change. And that will help you to find the first followers. You need the first followers, like at least 2 other people. But you only get them with your enthusiastic motivational speech. And then finally, one thing which we often forget, specifically in my country, we often try to look at things from, like, if you see the glass, which is like half empty and half full, we always call it half empty, and some people would even call it empty. In some other cultures, you would call it half full, right? Well, we are more pessimistic than that. So for us, it's super difficult, but you need to celebrate small wins, step by step. Celebrate the success. Show it to everyone. Say, hey, look what we can do now. It's so amazing. If you can do that, it's catchy. People start saying, hey, we want to be like them. Can we learn from them? What are the practices? And they start their journey as well. So change management, one of those things which Scrum Masters often missing. Now, leadership. I already told you that Scrum Master is a leadership role, right? And when we talk about Scrum Masters, we often say servant leader. And it's a weird name because many people ask me when I start talking about it, like, you know, but there's a servant and leader. It's sort of conflicting name. And I think it's a poor name, they're right. But if you look into it, like, what does that even mean in that definition? It says it's a person with empathy. And Scrum Masters need to have an empathy. Very important. It's a person who can heal relationships, building great teams, helping them to have a healthy conversation with each other. No conflicts. I mean, conflicts are good, but no personal conflicts. It's good to have a disagreement. It's good to voice it, but don't have the personal attacks, right? Talk about things, not attacking people. Conceptualization, stewardship, right? Commitment to the growth of the others. There are different types of leaders. There are those experts, right? Expert person knows the answer. So you're helping the others by actually telling them what to do. There is only one way how to do things in your mind, and you're the expert and you can advise the other people. Then when you grow up a little bit in your mind, I mean, mentally as a leader, you go to the achiever stage. And in achiever stage, you are pretty much saying it's all about the results. That's our next step. We want to achieve it. And by the way, how you do it, it's up to you guys. I trust you. You are smart enough to figure that out. So you're not telling them the best way anymore. You're just telling them what's the next step, what's the goal. Typical traditional managers. And then finally, the servant leadership is like a catalyst. It's a person who is committed to the growth of the others. So you're saying, well, you know, at the end of the day, it's all about environment. If I make a well-functioning, motivating environment, all of those people around are going to be great. I sometimes got this question about, like, what should we do with lazy people in a team? You know, let's look at them and think, like, there are no lazy people exist. I mean, like, they're just having a lazy behavior. That's true. And the behavior is a reflection of the environment. So can you change the environment so they actually change their behavior? And that's very tough, specifically for the people from the expert mindset, right? But commitment to the growth of the others. How can we help other people to become leaders? How can we help them to understand that they can change, they can grow, they can become different, they can be successful? And it takes a lot of listening, but also self-awareness. Are you self-aware of what you're doing and not doing? You remember I told you I was going through those meta skills exercise and saying I need to be more curious and patient. That was a pure self-awareness. I mean, I could say, I'm great, I'm knowledgeable, it's working, I have successful implementations. Or you can say, okay, what's next? Be more curious, be more patient, right? So are you self-aware about your weak spots? And are you doing something about it? Reservation and foresight, they're like, do you have a dream? And can you speak about it the way that the people will follow, right? And finally, are you able to build a community? Many managers are saying, like, you know, I have a department, I have my, you know, rank, those stars here. I'm a manager, so they have to do what I say. But the communities are very different because there is no manager in it. You just can be a leader. Take a first step and say, hey, I have this idea. Anyone willing to help me with it? And if that idea is awesome, they say, yeah, I can help you and I'll do that. I don't have a time now, but I can help you later. And if that idea is not appealing to the others, well, then they say, no, sorry, I'm busy. I don't. Right? So building a community around your ideas is a very different skills than the managers have. And that's exactly what you need to be able to do, because building a self-organizing teams, groups, and organizations based on self-organization, right? That's a different skill. It's like building communities. You need to make them enthusiastic about things. They can't be here just because somebody is their manager and tell them to be there. They need to be there because they trust. So, the first tip, Scrum Master is a leadership role. That's one of those most important learning from here. You're a leader, not a manager. You're a leader. And leadership is a state of mind. And Scrum Master is a leader. It's only up to you to stand up and say, hey, can we do this? Who want to help me with that? Take ownership and responsibility. Now, how the Scrum Master is working, right? Scrum Master always work on 3 different layers. The first one is my team. That's what most of us Scrum Masters know. You have your development team, developers there, and you're using all 5 approaches. You coach them, you facilitate, you teach them and explain, you remove impediments, you observe, right? And that's quite simple. Because it's 5 to 7 individuals, not a big deal. You facilitate the retrospective. You explain why do we have a Scrum at this organization? And what does it mean? You introduce a new practice. You tell them a story from a different company. You facilitate refinements. You help them with their issues and impediments so they actually stop having that many bugs, etc., etc., etc. You observe so you can help them to be better. And if you do that well, in about 6 months from a beginning, they are self-organized and you end up mostly observing because they do most of their stuff themselves. They are self-organizing. So there is a next step. You look around and you say, okay, so what's next? There is a second space, relationships. So here you still have your development team somewhere in the middle. But this time you're not focusing on it. You're actually focusing on those relationships this development team has with the other entities, like stakeholders, customers, managers, the other teams, right? And again, use all 5 approaches to teach them, share experiences, bring new practices, maybe introduce a scaling framework and recommend one. You facilitate a larger refinement with like 60 people in it. What else? You help product owner to prioritize the backlog, sharing those practices, and so on, right? And if you do that well, by the way, our goal is exactly the same. You want to make it self-organizing. That whole ecosystem, right? And if you do that well in about 3 years, they are self-organizing and you end up mostly observing. You tell them everything, you still coach them, you still facilitate time to time, you still introduce new things, but most of the time you're observing because they are self-organizing. They don't need you anymore on a day-to-day basis. So you go next. And there is a next level called entire system. And that's where you look at the entire organization from like 10,000 feet distance. It's not about the org chart, and that's my artistic version of the org chart, but it's not about it. Somewhere there is a strong hierarchy, somewhere it's less process-oriented, more process-oriented, less team-oriented, more team-oriented. And there is this entire system level where we actually look at it from a system perspective. The metaphor for that is that you can imagine yourself standing on that big, large observation tower. You can go around and see all the angles. You don't see the tiny details there, but you see how it behaves as a whole. What are the values we have at this organization? What is the culture? And before you start doing any changes here, it's good to imagine that everyone is right, but only partially. There's a positivity in it. But there is no right, no wrong in a complex system. What seems to be great from this side might not be great from that side. It might be completely indifferent from this side. Everyone is right, but only partially. There's the respect meta skill back in place. So we have the performance review system. Awesome. Those people didn't like it. And that's the impact which creates. Is it good or bad? Well, it's something. Now, do you want to change it? Okay, we can do that. That's no problem. You can always change whatever you want. But looking at the organization from a system level is one of those most critical skills you need to get. It's not about your team. So sometimes Scrum Masters are having the same mistake. They try to change the organization, but they are stuck mentally from their team level. They're saying, you have to change because we now here are using a Scrum. So you guys have to change as well. And you have to, and this needs to, no, you need to go up and look at the organization from that 10,000 feet distance system perspective and be able to see the whole complexity, be able to embrace it. And see the variety. Be curious, be patient, because everything takes time on this side. And there are a few hints on top of that. Always search for better ways. So typical problems I see in organizations is the Scrum Master got stuck. They go from nightmare way of working, really bad way of working, with like conflicts and people dislike it and complain, to a good way of working. And that's fine. So they feel, oh, we are good, we are done. Right? But there is always a better way. You believe you understand Scrum? Well, maybe not as much as you thought. Maybe there is a different understanding. Maybe there is something new you still need to come up with. So search for better ways. There is always a better way. Then another thing, don't push. Help people up. So very often we push them. We say, hey, you have to do this. There is a framework, follow it. No, be a culture anthropologist. Give them a hand if they need it. And be curious about their way of working first. And then the last thing we do at this level is like, you only need to be one step ahead. So if you have those no-nos, those first, creatures at the beginning of this journey, think like, no, I dislike Scrum. If you came to them saying like, hey, Scrum is awesome, you're gonna love it. I still dislike it, right? Because you are somewhere on the other side of that picture, smiling, saying it's awesome, it's great, and you have a very different language. You have a different reality, so it doesn't really fit, right? So you need to be able to go mentally back and be one step ahead for the people. So they still understand you. They feel it's realistic. Right? Don't make too big steps. So third tip, don't push, don't be behind, be only one step ahead. Which leads us pretty much towards the end of this talk. So 3 tips in summary. Scrum Master is a leadership role, and leadership is a state of mind. It's not a manager. You don't have to be a manager. You actually should not be a manager. Because Scrum Masters are using the power of influence, not the positional power. And that's a very different one. I would say myself more powerful. But people might not agree with me, right? So Scrum Master is a leadership role. Be a servant leader. That's the most important thing we have here. Observe, look at the organization from a system level. Be culture anthropologist, right? Don't push the practices here. I have to do it this way. Be patient, a little bit more. Look from the top. There is no right, no wrong. There's just different approaches. We can do this or that. Which one is going to help us to achieve a self-organizing team better? There are no shortcuts. You have to work your way through it. And finally, number 3, don't push, don't be behind. Never be too happy about a team. I mean, we are a great team. Okay, that's cool. What's next? How can we become even better? What can we do? Finally, my 2 books. The right one, you see, that's this nice Japanese translation of a great ScrumMaster. The white one on the left is Agile Leader. That's a new one. It's currently on Amazon. So you can start ordering. And if you want to join some of my classes, there is an online certified Scrum Master class on January 12 to 15. It's 4 hours per day. So it's not on Zoom. It's not that tough as you would imagine. It's actually quite fun, interactive class where you can talk with your peers. It's going to be translated as well, so you can join. And then we have online advanced certified Scrum Master class, again on Zoom, online, February 2 to 5. There are promotion codes, so if you want a discount, go ahead and use them. And I think somebody can copy it maybe to the chat if you like, guys. That would help. What else? Certified Scrum Master is a great class where we actually expect you to know the basics, know the terminology. And I'm doing the job of correcting typical misunderstandings. We do some simulations, we do a lot of conversations. It's a very interactive class. The advanced is not much more about new things. It's more about fixing and improving what you currently have into a little bit different context and making you more effective Scrum Master. So that's about those 2. And finally, you can connect with me. Here is my LinkedIn and some of my blog posts or websites, etc. So it was my pleasure to speak here today. And I might stop sharing. And if you have any questions, let me know.
はい、じゃあ、各部屋、もしくは Zoom の方、質問どうぞ。
いいですか？はい。サーバントリーダーに求められる、要素というか、能力みたいなスライドがあったと思います。
カメラをオンにしていただけますか？喋っている方。
カメラがオンになってますね。
So I do have a slide on servant leader. Here it is. So
yes, thank you. この能力を見るに、チームの外部の人が突然やってきたりだとか、もしくはジュニアレベルの人がいきなり、サーバントリーダーを務めるというのはとても難しいんじゃないかなというのが、感じました。なので、サーバントリーダーや、それをスクラムマスターを、やる人というのは、同じチームの中から誰か一人がスクラムマスターに、なっていくという、ステップを踏むというのが一番、いいというかベーシックなんじゃないかなと感じたんですけど、そのあたり、スクラムマスターはどこから登場するべきだと、筋は思いますか
？So somebody from the outside who has some experience might be easier to become a Scrum Master. On the other hand, we usually don't have that luxury. So we usually end up having a Scrum Masters from internals. So what I do training, and then in-house training, workshop. And then the second day after lunch, I usually ask them, hey, so do you still want to do this? Now you understand what the Scrum is about. Do you still want it? And they say yes or no, whatever, right? And they say, okay, so if yes, how are we going to start? Who wants to be a Scrum Master? And we really are just looking for volunteers. But we look for someone who is having an empathy, who has the soft skills sort of potential. Usually it's a person who is not the best expert. And by the way, whatever I know about the software itself, I need to sort of forget it, because you can't mix those two. You have to go back mentally and sort of forget, any details. So what helped me though was that I have a great relationship with those guys. They trust me. They respected me as a developer, as a person. I think it's more like a personal thing. So I got it easier. I would say one of the best Scrum Masters would be the psychologists or sociologists, those type of people. But we rarely get them in our industry. I asked why, one of the very few exceptions I know, and he said that most of his colleagues from a school, they never really understand why he is working with corporate world, because their mission is to help individuals, like heal people, right? Make clinicians, and they didn't want to really go to the industry. So I think they would be a good fit. I think they would earn much more money than they are currently doing in some of their jobs, but it's not their sort of dream job. So we have this issue that we need different skills, but they are actually not, we didn't make the job appealing enough for them. So they are back stuck with the technical people who are usually not that great at coaching and facilitation at first. Now you ask about leadership as well. So I would say everybody is a leader. I started being a leader at a Girl Scout camp, right? I actually got the second year I was there, I was one of those leaders of small groups, and I actually became leading people. I never asked for it. It just happened to me. So those kids are leaders already, right? So why can't you be? We're speaking about the same group size. I was leading when I was in Girl Scout camp, right? 5 to 7 individuals. That's usually quite simple. And that's your start. It's a state of mind anyway. Any other question?
ありがとうございました。Thank you.
ルームウエスト質問者がいます。
質問なんですけれども、レベル1、レベル2、レベル3で見る視点を切り替える、チームを見る、組織の全体を見る、最終的にはシステムを見るっていう話があったんですけれども、その、見るのを切り替える、なんかいいタイミングとかサインって、どういうところがあるのかなっていうのをぜひ教えていただけると。
今、すみません、どちらからの質問ですか？カメラ、ちょっとお顔が見えなかったので。
I can see him.
Okay. So.
He's in the main hall room, west. So,
ありがとうございます。はい。
Okay. So, I think the only criteria is, are they already self-organizing? So if you are in this my team level, right, here, you look into those guys and thinking about, are they self-organizing yet? Do they need me? What happens if I disappear for 2 weeks or 5 weeks, right? Well, they run by itself mostly. right? So those type of things. Now, if you go here, the same thing applies. Is this whole ecosystem with multiple teams, product owners, stakeholders, customers functioning well by itself? Of course, there is still here, here, and here. A bit of coaching, bit of teaching, bit of everything, right? But are you mostly observing and enjoying this nice view? And finally here, right, is I don't think you're ever gonna be done because it's so complex. Plus everything is changing. So even if you are most of your time over here in the entire system level, then very often you need to keep an eye on the other two levels because changes are coming, things are happening, right? And even a small change like one person leaving, one person coming can make a big difference in the team dynamics. So I think really the only place is, are you ready? Are you mostly observing? Are they already self-organizing? So that's it for me.
ありがとうございます。
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, I am wondering, we are right now working remotely. The team is remotely and in different time zones right now. So from what I have learned from your talk, like I think I need to learn to observe more. But to me, like my team is already self-organizing, really. Like they have their own meetings, they would have their own WebEx meetings and stuff like that. And so would you recommend that I start asking them to maybe include me in their meetings so that I can observe more in order to be a better observer, because like they're all in their own meetings and we're not physically in one place. So to be able to observe, I'm thinking like I suppose I would need to ask to be included so that I can observe.
I would say yes. Virtual is hard, but if you're not there with them, not seeing how they interact, not being with them, then you're not really able to do the job of a Scrum Master. And you also need to see them on camera. There is something better about if you just hear and if you see at least those, small tiles images we have on Zoom or whatever tool, different tool, right? But I think there is a very tough job of a Scrum Master if you don't participate with them on those things. Because then you're losing most of your information, like how they collaborate.
Yes,
and it's tough. So yeah. The virtual teams has been virtual forever and agile forever. They usually have a 24 hours, / whatever hours they're working session, right? If they're different time zones, it might be like all the time. Because whenever anybody is working, they have an open channel with the video, audio on, etc. So they can hear each other, talk to each other without needing to set a new meeting. So the best practice would say have a never-ending channel where they can collaborate and talk. Some of the tools like Zoom, for example, but some others will allow you to go to a side chat somewhere else. But there is always a main room, which represents like the same as a physical space in one location, if they're collocated. The Scrum Master is their product owner will be joining there as well. And they don't even plan any meetings, they just talk. So that's the best practice. Now, it's tough to tell people because they are not going to be used to work this way.
Right. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other question, anyone? No? Well then, thank you for listening. It was my pleasure to be here. And good luck on your Scrum Master journey. Enjoy the rest of the conference. If you ever come to Prague, let me know.
はい、ズージさんありがとうございました。